This is Jeff Webster with Trellis. We'll be starting momentarily. And welcome. Thanks for being with us today. A few housekeeping notes. We welcome your questions. You can put questions in the comment box or the Q&A. Trellis will be providing a recording and a PowerPoint to the group about a week from now. It takes us a little while to get that done. Allison Cornett and I will share with you some of the top findings from our new report, Studying on Empty, a qualitative study of low food security among college students. We're super excited about this report and to hear your reactions to it. But first, let me share some background on Trellis for those who may not be familiar with us. Trellis is a nonprofit 301c3 organization with a dual mission of one, helping student borrowers successfully repay their education loans, and two, promoting access and success in higher education. For nearly 40 years, Trellis Company has provided individualized service to student loan borrowers and support to institutions and communities. We also provide research on key issues regarding higher education. We serve the research department that I direct. We serve colleges and policymakers, providing insights into student and borrower success through the lens of college affordability. We do have a link right here to our 33 years of publications, looking at student loan default, student debt, loan counseling, and student retention. We are on Twitter and invite you to follow us at Trellis Research to learn about upcoming reports. And just a preview, our next report is a mixed method study looking at parent borrowing patterns and a hindsight view into how those decisions affected other financial outcomes and goals. We also have blogs and briefs in development. But today's focus is on studying on empty. Allison, what should people know about food security?
So before diving into the findings from studying on empty, we'll introduce the concept of food insecurity, as well as describe its prevalence and severity among post-secondary students. Food insecurity is an economic and social condition of limited or uncertain access to food. It is not synonymous with hunger, but hunger can be a sign and symptom of food insecurity. According to the USDA, high food security is characterized as no reported indications of food access problems or limitations. Marginal food security is defined as one or two reported indications, typically of anxiety over food sufficiency or shortage of food in the house. There are little or no indications of changes in diets or intake. Low food security is characterized by reports of reduced quality, variety, or desirability of diet. Again, there are little or no indication of reduced food intake. Very low food security, the most severe form, is defined as reports of multiple indications of disrupted eating patterns and reduced food intake. To better explain the different levels of food security, we're going to highlight a profile from each student in each phase. This is from a student with high and marginal food security. I applied for food stamps. I guess I got tired of being hungry. I get to eat breakfast before I go to work, before I go to school, and I usually take a sandwich or something to eat during the day, and it helps me concentrate more. I'm not sitting in class thinking, oh my God, I'm hungry. This quote comes from a female student with low food security. I couldn't afford to eat balanced meals. That was true pretty often, probably 70% of the time. I couldn't afford vegetables because pasta is way cheaper than vegetables. You can get a box of pasta for $1. Very low food security is the most severe. Here's a quote from a participant who has to make a choice between going to work or having food. Sometimes I don't have enough money. Sometimes it's enough money for gas, and I need that to get to work. There's times that if I have an apple, I'll eat an apple, or else go sometimes not eating that day. Now that we've explained the basics of food insecurity, let's get into the findings from studying on empty.
So studying on empty gives voice to the lived experience of going to college while struggling with low or very low food security. While it is an incredibly large qualitative study, it's not meant to be representative. Rather, It dives deeper into the dynamics of the condition and lets the reader hear how actual students articulate their experiences. But to give a sense of the prevalence, I'll cite this finding from the Trellis Student Financial Wellness Survey from fall 2018. So more than half of the 17,000 respondents showed signs of either low food security, 25%, or very low food security, 30%, within 30 days prior to the survey. This is in line with findings from other research, including the Hope Center for College, Community, and Justice, whose latest estimates of overall collegiate food security range from 41% for four-year university students to 48% for two-year college students. These prevalence statistics are an important snapshot in time, but Trellis wanted to dig deeper with qualitative methods and from a longitudinal framework. We did interviews from January to October 2017. We interviewed participants monthly for 9 months, capturing also their understudied summer experience. We started out with 72 post-secondary students from private four-year colleges, public four-year, and community colleges. Nearly all stayed in the study. We conducted 499 interviews, and this produced 291 hours of recordings. So in poring over all of these transcripts, we noticed a common dynamic. For a few students, low food security stayed the same over the 9 months, but for most, their level of security shifted over time. Students also told us that their academic performance mirrored their level of food security. We'll walk through shifting food security for 3 students, Molly, Andreas, and Cassandra.
This quote is from Molly, an 18 to 22-year-old full-time student who experienced all levels of food security during the study. I mean, I have enough money to make dinner. For lunch, I usually eat chips or a cheap snack like that. This month has been a lot harder than other months. The school applications, the deposits, the dog, a lot of expenses I don't normally have. Molly was a pre-med student with a dog who had recurring vet expenses. These vet bills coincided with expensive medical school applications and a decision to quit her own campus job to focus on academics. Her food security spiraled downwards, but luckily she was able to find free food while volunteering at the VA. Being able to eat at her parents' house over the summer helped restore her food security. But once Molly was back in school, those med school applications hurt her financially, and she plummeted from high to very low food security. Molly valued her academics, but the difficulties with meeting her basic needs endangered her future. The key takeaways here are her parents were affluent enough to help Molly and didn't need her to support them. Thousands in grad school application fees wreaked havoc with her food security. Access to free food through volunteering efforts helped Molly significantly. Leaving her on-campus job might have given Molly more time to study, but it also spurred financial troubles. Students in our study, like Molly, worked hard and fully committed themselves to school. Like our next student profile, these students made daily sacrifices to achieve their educational goals, but at the end of the day, they still had to worry about being able to eat.
So our next student is Andreas, and of course this is not an actual photo of Andreas. He's an 18 to 22-year-old full-time community college student with shared off-campus housing. And so Andreas contrasted his previous experience in group housing with his current situation. I was in a scholarship house before. I lived with 17 other guys. It was a big house. $500 was spent every single week on groceries, and we always had food in the house and meals cooked for us at night. I never had to worry about food like I do now. Now I worry about every single meal. So he started our study unemployed and having just lost a scholarship. He experienced low food security, but things would get worse before they got better. He got sick and stayed unemployed. Then his car was vandalized. He needed money and found a job, but the schedule conflicted with school. Parents provided game-changing support to prevent him from becoming very low food secure again. Landing a paid internship, eating out less, and splitting grocery costs with his brother restored his food security. The next student, Cassandra, mostly stayed in a state of very low food security.
Our third student profile on shifting food security features Cassandra, a 28 to 32-year-old full-time private student. This quote describes her reaction to getting a late financial aid disbursement after moving into a new apartment. I had extra financial aid money out of nowhere, and it was pretty awesome. I wasn't totally poor, but that went away extremely quickly. To me, $1,800 is like $10,000. So it was real exciting, but it went so fast. We got stuff for our apartment, we paid bills, we went crazy with groceries. So we spent that money fast. After breaking up with her boyfriend and moving in with her parents the previous semester, Cassandra found herself living with very low food security. During the first 3 months of the study, Cassandra described herself as having $0 all the time. In month 3, she moves in with her new romantic partner. She reports feeling too embarrassed to reach out to her school for help with financial issues. Her situation improves drastically in month 4 when she receives a late disbursement of $1,800 in financial aid, a $50 grocery store gift card from a parent, and $200 for pet sitting. She uses the money to furnish her apartment, pay bills, and stock up on groceries. After getting far more inconsistent hours at her job and a problematic flat tire, the money runs out, and her food security plummets from high to very low, where it remains for the rest of the study.
Okay, what these three typical students' experiences suggest is that food security is fluid and shifts due to certain predictable drivers like employment, financial resources, social networks, and expenses. Based on hundreds of interviews, here are some of the drivers of improving food security. For employment, if the student's able to have stable pay or receives a living wage, or if there's an easy commute, uh, because easy commute or work schedule accommodates school. Those are important characteristics for employment. For financial resources, it's when you see gains in access to federal, institutional, or supplemental aid, like Pell Grants or SNAP, or if when the financial aid disbursement happens at the beginning of the semester. Social networks are also important. Things that drive improving food security are when parents send money, student returns home to live with parents, they move in with siblings, the parents, happen to visit and buy groceries for the student, or when friends give meal swipes or pick up the check at meals. Also, romantic partners can help pay for and prepare meals. Those all help drive food security. Expenses are also important. Um, when the student finds time to grocery shop and plan, which is important, plan affordable meals. Family members provide child care that can really help with the expense side, or if they move to a less expensive apartment. Receiving transportation vouchers can be very important, and if the student has access to open resource textbooks. So these four drivers can also lead to declining food security. So if we look at employment, things that decline the level of food security are things such as the student has erratic work hours, or if they lose a job, or if the job is low paying, or has a long commute, or even if they're underemployed. For financial resources, it's when they lose access to student aid, if they have insufficient aid package, or if they lose academic or merit-based scholarships, um, if they're classified as a dependent student when actually they're independent. Those are things that can decline the food security level for the student. For social networks, it's when key people like parents who are supporting them, if they lose their job or become ill, if there's a single parent or has dependents, if there's abrupt changes in childcare, for example, if you lose access or increase, if the cost at daycare goes up. If a sibling or parent requires financial support, which happens a lot for low-income families. Also, if there's a separation or divorce from a romantic partner, those are things that um, help decline the level of food security. For expenses, it's these unexpected expenses, things such as the car needs repair, there's unexpected medical bills, or the price of daycare rises, cost of textbooks, lab fees. If a roommate moves out and doesn't pay their share of rent, those can really be damaging. Or if the landlord increases the rent, or if the utility bill spikes due to the weather. So Allison will share what Trellis has learned about some of the impacts of low food security.
The consequences of food insecurity in studying on empty permeated every aspect of participants' lives. Supporting previous research, food insecure students reported increased stress and feelings of guilt and shame, negative health outcomes, such as unwanted weight gain or loss, lack of energy, and low iron levels. Students also reported decreased academic performance and expectations, and disrupted social and family lives. This quote from a full-time, first-generation public student illustrates one of the most prevalent impacts of food insecurity, stress. Food has played a big part in my stress. I didn't realize how stressful food can be with school. That's something that people don't understand when they go off to college. That you're basically on your own and it's harder to keep it balanced and sufficient than you'd expect. You can have food, but is it a real meal?
Okay, when students are trying to cope with their condition, we found these 5 things to be very important: inferior food substitutions, housing arrangements, external resources, academic shortcuts, and money management. So when we talk about inferior food substitutions, it's within the context of balancing money, time, and energy. So oftentimes they will choose less healthy, less filling, or more processed food um, to when they're trying to balance those, especially the time and money. Also, when they're students in this condition, they're still eating but not eating well, and not conducive in a way that has the sustained energy that they need to excel in school. So for the housing arrangements, it's things like when they take on a roommate to lower their costs. This is very common when students are dealing with this, but the roommates may skip out on their lease payments, creating even bigger problems. There also may be some, simple incompatibility issues with the roommate, such as a roommate that, well, I don't know, is a slob in the kitchen. We did have a student experiencing that, and it made preparing meals difficult. Also, when the landlord has issues regarding deposits, move-in schedules, increase in rent. Also important for housing arrangements is where that housing is located. To the extent that it's in proximity to the school or work or where there's a grocery store, that really can help situations. Um, okay. For external resources, what we learned from the students is that when they are struggling, they reach out first to family, and then after family, friends, and both of those before they try to seek help from government or the school. When parents lose jobs or become sick, it creates a crisis for the low food secure student. So academic shortcuts, what do we mean by that? When students are struggling with their material circumstances, their basic needs, when this affects the amount of time to study and the quality of that time. So when we talk about quality of study time, it's things like, are they able to study at a library, or is this like real late after a real late work shift? So the quality of that time can vary, and that's very important in their coping strategy with low food security. Money management is also important. While some in low food security become even more determined to get their financial house in order, others found the chronic stress debilitating in making important financial decisions. So here's a quote from one student. as they were trying to cope with low food security. I was working on $7 in my bank account for a good 5 days. I was so worried some hidden thing would suddenly come out and it would bounce. I was not a happy camper, but I knew I could last the week with what we had. I lived off my tip money for meals at work. If I didn't get enough tips that day, I just wouldn't eat. So, to summarize, food security appears fluid. We have a good idea of what the drivers are, and with this information, schools and policymakers can make a difference, creating the conditions that will allow that student to become academically successful. So Trellis often meets with management at colleges and universities to discuss the implications of our research. Through this experience, we've gained insights into how schools put this research into practice. And we'll talk about 4 ways. One, expanding resources. 2, improving financial planning. 3, building community partnerships. And 4, changing campus culture. We'll look at the resources. First, we'll look at the resources they provide.
Expanding campus resources allows students to focus on being students. Schools can offer emergency aid programs that help to cover unexpected expenses, such as car repairs, medical bills, computer repairs, etc. Schools can connect eligible students to public benefits like SNAP, TANF, and WIC. Schools can provide healthy and low-price food options in campus dining areas. Schools can also rework financial aid calculations and delivery, and build student resource centers that house food pantries, stock hygiene products, and offer clothes closets and counseling services to students.
Okay.
Schools can also work to build a student's ability to plan finances.
So it's real common for schools to work with students on an academic plan to graduate, but students also need a financial plan for completion. So a lot of schools are helping students create financial plans through workshops and classes. It's important to help students understand the full cost of college, including supplemental costs like textbooks, things like that that may not be apparent, especially for first-generation students. Some schools provide one-on-one financial coaching, either in person or over the phone, and many have adopted a peer-to-peer coaching with trained near peers. These are fellow classmates, but typically upperclassmen who have been trained in financial counseling, and the distance between the student and their classmate is somewhat small and oftentimes allows the student to talk about sensitive issues like finances. So in addition to expanding resources and improving financial decision making, some schools promote reach out to their communities to better address these student needs.
Colleges can partner with churches and other nonprofit organizations to assist with stocking food pantries and clothes closets, sign agreements with local transportation agencies for free bus services, and fundraise for emergency aid and other grants.
So higher education can be intimidating and alienating to students trying to meet basic needs. It's important to destigmatize poverty and train staff and faculty to identify signs of basic needs and security so help can be provided. Schools use unmet need as a risk factor in monitoring how they are doing and if they need help. Uh, Schools are also rethinking college enrollment options, trying to make schedules convenient for students. Also, it's important how you message affordability, and schools that do this successfully do it through a lens of a student who's making health-altering sacrifices to earn a degree. Schools also will provide open education resources. Textbook costs can be a barrier to learning. So when we listen to students in the schools that serve them, we learn 3 main things. 1, students put effort into balancing finances, time, and energy. Academic success is a product of how well they are able to do this and how big the challenges they face. Food security among college students is typically fluid, And if you better control the drivers of food security changes, and students will be more successful. These stories tell how sacrifice, persistence, personal growth, caring administrators, beneficial programs, and chance affect students' ability to stay in school. Schools can galvanize support within their communities and among elected representatives to address food security. So thank you for listening. Now we would like to hear your questions and your thoughts about this research. And you can type those into the chat box or the Q&A. Okay, we'll stay here for a little bit if people have any questions, but you can find out about our research by following us on Twitter at Trellis Research. Our new report, Studying on Empty, can be found on our website, and we welcome you to check that out. And we look forward to how this research will inform practices. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, that was more of a comment. I'm sorry. Renelda has a question about students applying for food stamps or SNAP. You could share that question with us. And we also will be sharing the PowerPoint slides. We'll be sending that out in about a week. Okay, so I see we have a question about students who didn't necessarily make good financial decisions, which resulted in food insecurity. And yes, we did see that. There is a section in the report, I believe it's called non-compulsory food insecurity, and it's where we saw students who were trying to deal mostly with the stress of trying to balance their lives with college and their families and school and meeting their basic needs. And sometimes they would resolve that anxiety and stress by going out to eat with friends and overspending. And many students admitted that they did this knowingly, but it still resulted in lower finances and tighter budgets at the end of the week, which often made the students drop from one state of food security to the other.
And I would also like to add that making financial decisions as a college student that's struggling with basic needs is very difficult. If any type of basic budgeting issues revolve around what's the revenue that's coming in and what are the expenses. So the problem is on the revenue side is sometimes that's erratic, whether it's a matter of the student having erratic hours, number of hours. So if you think, near Christmas, you're working retail, you get a lot of hours, but in the slower times, you may not get as many hours as you want. So their revenue's not as, what they expected. Also, when they get big lump sums at the beginning of the semester, it's a challenge to try to predict how much, how that's going to last over the semester. That's on the revenue side. On the spending side, especially students who are first generation and may not, know the type of expenses to expect, they can be surprised by things as simple as, parking fees on campus, textbook costs, lab fees, things like that. So they're trying to do this, budgeting on, narrow margins without being real sure how much money's coming in and how much they have to pay out. So anyway, so it's important to try to work with that student to try to get them to have a plan for being able to complete.
Okay, I see we have another question from Michael on what training is available for faculty and staff to identify needs in financial struggles.
So I think there's different vendors that provide that. I know Donna Beagle provides that kind of training, and I'm sure there's other providers. I don't really have a list. If you would like to email me at jeff.webster@trelliscompany.org, then I can try to reach out and see if there's additional vendors.
Yeah, I would just try doing, a search for poverty training, and see what comes up. Like Jeff said, Donna Beagle is pretty well known in this arena. Um, so let's move on to our next question. Do you have data that demonstrates food insecurity academic success, such as their GPA or retention?
Um, so ours is a qualitative study, so you wouldn't be able to generalize. It's not a random control trial, um, but it's pretty clear from the stories that students tell us. It is a longitudinal study, so we asked them about how their finances affected their academic performance each month. And from that, it was pretty clear that there was a connection between, their ability to meet their basic needs and the energy level they had to be able to prepare.
Okay. I also see another question from Ronelda on where can uh, they send students to apply for SNAP, or who can we speak to help the students apply?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question. I don't think anyone expects like uh, faculty or anyone to be able to be a social worker and know all the ins and outs, but it is important to be able to point them to someone who does know. And I believe if you really do care as an institution about academic success, this is really important to solve. And you need to have somebody on your campus that can help students navigate um, the various needs that they may have. And applying for something like SNAP is one of those things that's real important. What a lot of schools have done is if they're a four-year school and they offer social work as a major, they will work with those students to get some practical experience and have this be one of the things that helps that student learn, and it provides a needed assistance for students struggling with basic needs. If you don't have one of those programs, oftentimes, say, a community college is located in the same city with a four-year school that may have that, and developing those kind of partnerships is very important.
If you have any more questions, feel free to type them in the chat box or in the Q&A. Like we said earlier, we'll hang around for a little bit to make sure that we get everyone's questions answered. Okay, well, I don't think any more questions are coming in, so thank you guys so much for listening. We really appreciate it. And we'll be signing off. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.